Hey, hope you're keeping well today. I'm chatting with Andy Braced, test match referee. So to start, chat to me about your journey, yeah, starting out in the game, I suppose up until now.
Yeah, it's funny really, Brian. I've been for the last 15 years been here in Ireland, but grew up in Wales, went off to university in Plymouth for 3 years, and then managed to get set up over here in Ireland, playing rugby initially. Like any referee will say, the injuries take its toll, and kind of lost the motivation to play over the first couple of years with the setbacks, and then I was working with Munster Rugby at the time as a community rugby development officer, and it was always something I wanted to go into. With that was my field from a sports science coaching background, and is what I studied, and then yeah, I never thought it'd lead to refereeing. But it's strange how one door shuts, another door opens. I was working with Johnny Lacey in Munster Rugby, ex-international referee as well, and he said this might be another avenue for you to go down and give it a go. And I was kind of playing, coaching at the same time, and then trying to referee as well. And then I couldn't continue, obviously playing at All Ireland League level, and referee at the same level as well. So yeah, I kind of made the decision to go all in. Dave McHugh at the time was our RFU referee development manager, and yeah, through the support of the RFU himself and Johnny Lacey, who became my coach over the last few years. Yeah, kind of one year led to another, and yeah, 10 years on, I'm still here refereeing. So yeah, it's a strange journey. As I said, I never thought I'd go down the refereeing route, but yeah, I haven't looked back since.
Who were you playing with in the AIL?
So initially came over, I played with Tralee. So I had my first year in Tralee. They were very good to me. They set me up down in Kerry there with a kind of had the club and community rugby officer role with Munster Rugby, so in the schools and clubs, and then yeah, moved to Limerick. Then got the moved to Old Crescent, who I've been with ever since. Also been very good to me, and yeah, the full-time position there came up with Munster Rugby in Limerick. So I went for that, as I said, a community rugby officer role. And I was 10 years then with Munster Rugby, whilst playing with All Crescent in the early days there. So, but yeah, after about 3 years with them, I went, yeah, put all the eggs in one basket really, and went down the refereeing route. And that kind of really kick-started very quickly of the first couple of years, British and Irish Cup, and then into the Pro 12 at the time. Then moved to Pro 14 over the early years, and then into obviously now the United Rugby Championship. So um, yeah, so it was like Crescent have kind of and Tralee were really good as I mentioned to me. They opened those doors and those opportunities for me to firstly work with Munster Rugby in that coaching position, which is kind of where I saw myself after playing. Um, I knew I was never going to be a professional rugby player, but this was another avenue then through the refereeing. And as I said, yeah, so it's just strange how kind of one door shuts, another opens, and it leads me into something that I never thought I was going to come to Ireland and do. And yeah, refereeing has been a great journey over the last 10 years, and never thought I'd be sitting here as a test referee now. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, what was it the case? Johnny Lacey was like, you were working with Munster, and he was like, "Hey, would you think about refereeing?" And you said, "Yeah." And then he said, "All right, go and ref this game this weekend." Or like, how do you get started, or yeah, get
Yeah,
going?
it's a good question, Brian. I think probably sick of me giving out about referees when I was playing every weekend on a Monday morning coming into the Munster Rugby office. So yeah, you say put your whistle where your mouth is, and yeah, the rest is history, I guess. But no, the guys were really good in the Munster Rugby office. We had the likes of Peter Fitzgibbon, Ollie Hodges, who's now TMOing with me, Johnny Lacey, obviously, and there was a lot of kind of referees in the office already. And they were very helpful and supportive to me when I was in my early kind of stages of my career, and still are to this day. But yeah, Johnny was yeah a mentor to me. Obviously, he was refereeing in the first few years, and I got to referee with him, and be on the line for him, and he repaid that favor many games as well for me, which helped me. And when I got a couple of nice opportunities a few years back in the knockout games of URC and EPCR, that they would run in touch for me, him and George Clancy, and to have their experience on the line, particularly in your first knockout game, and I think it was Ulster Connacht it was. Um, yeah, it's just massive. It's huge to lean on their support and experience, help you in those big moments who've been there over and over again, between them over 70, 80 test matches between them. So it's massive to have that support and experience, as I mentioned, going into your first knockout game. But yeah, Johnny was great with me, and I think that year after, it was about 2018, 2019, when I went to the Rugby World Cup as an assistant referee. He took up the role as a high performance and talent ID manager in the IRFU, so a high performance coach. So he was coaching the likes of myself and Frank Murphy, who's now gone into that role, as my coach, and Joy Neville, and now recently Owen Cross and Chris Busby, and so he'd been excellent with us as and a great support for us. He's obviously been there, done that, and you really, when we became full time in 2017, we were probably one of the last tier one nations to go full time. So to have Johnny's experience to go straight in that transition from refereeing into that coaching role was huge for us because we never had really a coach. We had obviously in the Dave McHugh as our referee manager. He was our coach, but we were never full time in the RFU. So that was the first part that the RFU put in place, and the high performance structures that go with that. You know, the full time S&C structures, sports psychology, nutrition support. So the whole structures have changed in refereeing in the RFU that we'd never had before. So to go into that kind of full-time environment space, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going up to Dublin now this evening, and we'll have a team meeting tomorrow. We'll have a session there with Nick Winkelman, who's a high performance S&C lead. So we'd have a session with him, and then do our actual reviews then from European rounds over the weekend with Frank. So Frank is now transitioned similar to Johnny a few years back. Now that he's retired, he's gone into that role as high performance coach for us. So I think it really helps because the two, Johnny and Frank, have both played at very high level. Frank professionally, 200 caps, for Connacht and Leicester, and so to have that, been there, done that from a playing experience, and to come away from obviously refereeing, and he's gone straight into that coaching role. Is fresh, So, and that's really great to have. As I said, that support from the two guys over the years. Now Johnny's gone into the World Rugby position as talent ID manager with World Rugby. So yeah, it's a lot of change over the last 6 months since and year, 12 months since the Rugby World Cup. But yeah, so new positions now, and I think we're in a really strong place in the Irish refereeing systems, which is great.
Yeah, that's class. So the full time, like you mentioned, so you've a team of referees and you train together in Dublin like once a week or twice a week, in the middle of the week, and you do reviews. It's yeah, it sounds like very similar to a player, or what players would have, and that you have that yeah, team or community, or that you're versus you going off and being on an island on your own and maybe even doing a bit of part-time work, like you would say, and then going and jumping on a plane and meeting some new AORs that you've never met before. And yeah, so it's yeah, it's professional, as you said.
No, no, definitely, Brian. I think that's the really nice change, particularly the last few years, that I really regularly working with like the likes of Owen Cross, Chris Busby now. So the three of us were involved in the internationals together in November, just gone to England, South Africa, Scotland, Australia that Chris did, and Six Nations, um, and obviously Chris was at the Rugby World Cup with me as well. So the two of us and Joy Neville and Brian McNeice as TMO. So I think working together and having that team, that consistent team, I think only will drive accuracy and success because you're working consistently without those same assistant referees, same TMOs. You know what they know what I want, I know what they want. So you don't have to kind of repeat everything, as you said, like going into a new team or assistant referees, TMOs you haven't worked with before. So it just drives that consistency and accuracy across performance, and I think that's what we're all striving for. Um, so having the likes of the lads and working together, and that's what the full time, like becoming full time and being in a high performance environment, Brian, has really helped us because as I said, we'll meet in Dublin now tomorrow. So this will be our last meet before Christmas break. So we'll review the European games. Um, so traditionally you go out as a Irish team in Europe for neutrality. So you'd have the same assistant referees and TMO. And then when you go back into pros, you probably have a similar again. But when you go abroad, so if I'm reffing in Wales, for example, or Scotland or Italy, South Africa, then you'd usually have the assistant referees from that country, but we would have the TMO and the referee neutral. So if I'm doing, so I came back from South Africa there recently. I did Stormers in Glasgow. Chris would ref first week, Sharks Glasgow. I'd TMO for him, and then going into the second week, he TMO for me. But you'd have the two South African assistant referees. So um, yeah, it's great because we're all kind of constantly in each other's company discussing trends, preparing together, reviewing together when we're in Dublin. But that can be difficult because obviously Chris is up north, myself and Owen are in Limerick, and now Peter Martin, who's just recently become full-time contracted as well, he's up north. So to logistically to get together as a group weekly is very difficult. So we would um, we would meet regularly, but probably around once a month. But then you'd still train in your area. So myself and Owen would work in Limerick together. We train together. Crossley would be in with Munster. I regularly go in between Leinster and Connacht, or Chris would be working in Ulster. So, and then the three of us would be in the national team often as well, working with the team there. So I think that's huge because it's not only beneficial to the team to have a referee in, it stops the coaches referee in the session and lets them focus on the session themselves. But it's hugely beneficial for us because it's the next best thing to the match day environment rather than training just running by yourself doing the repeated tempos or conditioning runs. But with myself and Owen on a Tuesday, Thursday mornings. But going in with a team is massive because you're getting scrum practice there. Uh, and the more scrums you can referee, the better prepared you're going to be for the weekend. Um, but you're also refereeing the game in the session, which, as I said, that a team can go into training and they're training for that weekend, whereas we're on our own, so you can't exactly your best kind of training for that is being in with a team, as I said. So um, that's yeah, Tuesday, Thursday we work with Rob Casti in Limerick, in our area. So we train, we do a pitch session and a gym session. Wednesday be off. Monday you do your kind of recovery off feet stuff or and your reviews, and then you're out again. Then Friday, Brian, Saturday match, back Sunday. So it is a full-time week in itself. And as I mentioned, when we became full-time in 2017, it kind of had to go that way because you just can't. The way refereeing has gone now and the way the game has gone, we had to stay with it. Otherwise, you're going to just get left behind. So, and I think that's, yeah, it's been a really nice change over the last 7 years to be in that full-time headspace of focusing on refereeing as opposed to trying to juggle a 9 to 5 job then as well.
Yeah, and something you mentioned there, like going in with teams, it's so good. I coach now, and we had yeah, like a ref come in during the year a couple of times, and it's so helpful as a coach actually, because like at the start, it used to happen at the start of the season, you'd have a ref come in, just oh new laws or how are you seeing this, or just have a quick chat and yeah, maybe do one or two things, but yeah, I think as a coach, like the more regularly you can have a ref in, because like you say, it's like the ref then refs the session for you. Because as a coach, you kind of do that, and you're you're kind of splitting your time. Like if you're yeah refing a game in training, and you can't really coach as well, and yeah, you have assistant coaches, but you know, and they can do things, but it's yeah, it's really good. It's really helpful as a coach, and you can just say to the ref, "Oh, we're playing this game where it's five touches and then a turnover, or it's whatever, whatever,"
Yeah.
and the ref just is like, "Oh, sweet as," and yeah, and jumps in and does that, and it just allows you, it frees you up to do a different role, to coach
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, no, very much so. And even when I'm doing a bit with All Crescent now, my club, and it just helps to have a referee there. To referee your set piece unit, scrum line out, as you mentioned, Brian.
Yeah,
Um, so you're not trying to, I even speak to some of the players, and they're like, when a referee's not there, it just becomes a free for all because there's no structure to the session then. But that's hugely beneficial to us just as much then as I mentioned and alluded to is you're getting kind of practice at scrums and reffing line out live mauls that you wouldn't get unless you're going into a match day on a Saturday. So things that might come up in a weekend that maybe work ons for me or areas to think about that I can then try and fix that then into the session then with a team. Like going in with the national team is massive for us because the sessions are always 100 mile an hour. So it's the next best thing to a match day environment on a game day. So that's really good for us.
yeah, and you mentioned sports psychology earlier, and yeah, I was keen to ask you about like your preparation, how you prepare for games, but yeah, I would think like obviously that's such a huge, huge part of it. Like, you know, for a referee to be, as you said, going in with a team, you know, a club team, but even then, as say, a national team, and being in that environment and would prepare you, yeah, just excellently for the game, the way it prepares the players or the coaches or the team for the game. And so what other kind of stuff would you do in your preparation, yeah, on it for a Saturday?
Yeah, so like you touched on it there, Brian, just around the sports psych side of things, and it's something that the RFU have brought in now with we've a full-time position there with Kevin McMenamin. So you probably remember the ex-Dublin GA player. He's working with us from a sports performance perspective, from our mental state. So I think you can be physically you can be the fittest out there, but if you break down mentally, that's a huge factor then for a referee. So I want to be mentally fit just as much as physically fit. Um, so a lot of the kind of even the drills that we do or game like situations in training that we try and mirror that into a match day, as I said. So you might be try and fatigue yourself to by doing repeated conditioning runs, and then it might be like hand-eye coordination incorporated into that. So trying to be thinking on the spot mentally. So if, very much similar to like a TMO decision. So if I've done a 100-meter breakaway um, and then I have a TMO decision to make, if I break down then because I'm mentally fatigued, then that's an issue. So that's why I'm really trying to get that balance right between physical and mental. Because I think I remember reading recently something that talked about, we're always like strong on our going to the gym and from a physical perspective and nutrition perspective, always looking at what we eat, but how much time do we look at from a mental side of things? How much time do we prepare from a mental perspective and review from a mental perspective? So it's something that World Rugby are really kind of driving with us as well. Anytime we go into camps from that mindset piece, which is becoming more and more important, I think, in the game, to be really in the moment, being able to give your best version, best decision. So you're not having that clutter at the back of your mind, thinking whether was that a right decision, wrong decision, am I in the right position, wrong position? I want that muscle memory to take over and just be natural. And for that to be instinctive, I think that takes high levels of training then to being in the moment, to be able to give that the best decision for that particular moment, as I mentioned. So
Yeah,
and
class.
Kevin, yeah, Kevin's been brilliant with us, Brian. Like, so he'll be in with us now tomorrow again when we're in Dublin. So we'll touch on that from a group, but then he'll also work with us from an individual one-to-one perspective. So we work as a group. What are the areas we're looking at, and then the one-on-one. What do I need to work on for me? Which is going to be different between from me to Crossy to Chris to Peter. So um, yeah, and I think that's a massive asset to have that we can and support resource to lean on in Kevin. And yeah, it's great that the RFU put that in place for us.
Yeah, brilliant. And what would be like a work on that you could have or one could have that you would be working on him or with him on? Like, yeah, what would one be for a referee?
Yeah, so he talks a lot about like obviously I don't want to kind of delve into too much for sharing
Yeah,
his information, but we talk about like the green light, red light. You might have heard a lot the talking with insights of B A game, B game, or whatever you want to call it. So that red being the threat state versus green being like your go-to, your opportunities of being what's the best decision for me. So I don't want to be in the red, and how do I bring myself back into the green? So, and there's different ways I insight, so red and blue. Um, so how do I come up with little trigger words or in the moment of that's positive self-talk? It might be a positive imagery or not thinking negative self-talking or negative imagery from the past experiences that might come back and bite you in that moment again. I think that like a lot can help with experience as well. So like being like having the scars from previous games of, where games haven't gone well, or moments or decisions that haven't gone well. If you're put in that position again, then would you have made a different decision? And I think like you can't buy experience. I think that's you can do all the training in the world, but until you've been in that moment and experienced, okay, didn't give the right decision there that cost that team the game. Would I be better for it if I, in a bigger game again now in the future to make a better, more understandable, followable decision? So I'm not, pulling the rabbit out of the hat and with say 2 minutes to go and because we always talk about strategic decision making in the moment. It's not about chasing perfection. It's not about trying to get every decision right. It's got to be strategic in the moment, being smart. So we want to be strong, but you also got to be smart in your decision making. I don't want to give a not rolling away penalty that is not consistent with what I've given for the previous 79 minutes to decide the game. So we talk a lot about, setting up a game well, putting structure on the game, but then that has to be connected for 80 minutes to the back end to close a game out. So you're not becoming the talking point, being in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. So, and that's what every one of us is striving for, you want to get those big moments right. You don't want to be in the spotlight, which is becoming more and more common because I think the more technology we've introduced or the more law changes or directives that we bring in, then the expectation levels rise. Then so everybody expects you to get that decision right. And there's no such thing as a perfect game as we always talk about, but and the game isn't black and white. And I think that's what makes the game great and unique is we have a lot of gray in the game. Yes, okay, there's a lot of interpretations and difference of interpretations from referee to referee, and but as a group, we're always trying to strive for that consistency. So if I give, a tackler not rolling away because the jackal is in position, then we consistent with that as a group. So the next week that we're not going to give a different decision, reward the tackler when the tackle has affected the arriving player's clean out, for example. So um, I think like when you look at from a technical perspective, I think we're in a really good place there. I think we've taken massive strides of being strong on the tackler, for example, which has helped and resulted in a lot more flow and speed of ball as a result. Um, but then teams will always try and push the edge. Then okay, they know they're going to be strong on the tackler, so then going to try and find ways to trap players back in or hold players back in because you're going to penalize the tackler. That's where you have to be able to, as I talked about, being strategic and being smart, not falling for that or pulling the rabbit out of the hat and penalizing that when he's clearly being held in to decide a game. So that's why I talk about being smart in the when you get into that back end of the game, particularly in that red zone area to close the game out well, so you don't become the talking point.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember when playing a real good one, easy one is that when you be carrying a ball and someone's tight to you to hold on to them and like grab their jersey and you can hold them in, but like it's very noticeable now watching games. Like refs are just so attuned to that, and like nowadays it's more people trapping with their legs. Like they'll stand in a certain way to trap the guy between between their legs, and you see yeah refs are very clued in to that and won't give the right really really well so because sometimes it's like yeah sometimes the player isn't rolling away and you often see them where it's like not harsh but it's like it's tough and you want to be tough because you want the attacking team to have the flow of the game that you want the benefit to go with the attacking team, so it's like if you're a little bit slow getting out of there, yeah, you're getting pinged and that's setting a precedence for a fast flowing game which we all want. But yeah, you do see it as well then sometimes when it go, the rest will give a horn. It's like, no, you're trapping them in there, and it's yeah, you can see them doing it.
And that's the thing. You always got to be one step ahead, right? Because it's a game within a game. Like, teams are always
Yeah,
going to try and push that boundary within the limits and within the laws. And you've got to be able to process that and not pull the rabbit out of the hat to penalize something that doesn't make sense or is not consistent from how you refereed the game throughout. So, um, and that's always a challenge as well, isn't it? That's what makes the game unique, as I said. Um, but I think it's important that whatever you go after, that you're consistent for that for the 80 minutes. So if I'm strong on that tackler, then okay, teams know that okay, they've got to get out of there because he's going to be hard on us there. As long as you're consistent and get that balance right, equity right for both teams, then I think that is the key. Teams can adapt then to your interpretation there, but it's where teams get frustrated is if I start penalising one team, but then I'm not consistent with the other team for not doing the same, or I might say, "Oh, you're holding them in," but same happened the other way, and I penalise the tackler. So that's what I always talk about, and really in my preparation with my team is whatever we go after, lads, we have to be consistent for that for 80 minutes um, in our application because. I think that's the most important part. Is like if I'm strong on sealing off one side, then I got to do the same the other side. If I'm going to come in for a neck roll or a croc roll on one team, then we've got to make sure we're consistent. That's our parameters then for 80. And sometimes you can get those parameters wrong. You can go too strong one way, Brian. So like you can be strong on like a neck roll that probably was microscopic. It wasn't clear and obvious. But now sometimes you can create the rob for your own back because that's the one you've come in for there, then you have to get every single one now because a coach will come back at you rightly so of saying, well, penalize one there when you didn't penalize three others. So um, yeah, and that's important because that's the challenge. Sorry, that's because you can nitpick of every area, can you, and try and find ways of where we weren't
yeah,
consistent.
and that's today. Like you're managing. You said something earlier about like setting up the game. I can't remember your exact words, something around that. And it's like, yeah, you're managing the game because and facilitating the game and the flow of the game because like you're kind of saying there, every passage of play, there's things you can penalize probably. and it's I think it's, refs say non-decisions or yeah, and it's what you choose or decide to go after, and it's a gray area, and that's like you say again why we love the game, and it's not black and white, like it's not chess, and yeah, that must be, yeah, something interesting. I suppose you know kind of how you like to referee. You're always, working on certain things, and it's you have an idea of how you want to manage the game, and you go into it with kind of ideas of what to be looking out for, with your team. You kind of chat, oh, maybe the offside line, or let's make sure they're onside today, or let's make sure the tackler isn't rolling away today, or a couple of kind of key things. Is that it?
think so, yeah, Brian. Like obviously in the year we've had you'll always have that three tournaments you're refereeing in. So from World Rugby just come out of in EPCR Europe and URC, which is a domestic competition. So you want to be aligned to what World Rugby's priorities are. So our critical few we talk about, so the speed, safety, space, and then line out, maul, and scrum. So that they're the kind of fundamental pillars, if you want to call it, of the game. Um, so how do we be really accurate on the critical few in those areas? What are the two or three really key points in those areas? Um, and I think when I'm preparing my team, for me, it's all about trying to get what matters. And we talk a lot about that. You could find a penalty. You hear often you can find a penalty at every single breakdown, for example, or you can get a measuring tape out to see whether he's okay a foot offside or not. That's not the game. We want to be clear and obvious. We want to be strong on getting those right, those critical few right, and getting what matters, but also in understanding we have to have a balance of keeping the game flowing. We have a responsibility to the shape of the game and the stakeholders of I don't want to be blowing the whistle every single breakdown. So to try and get that balance right is it is hard, and that is always a challenge, as I mentioned. Um, when you look at like, the shape of the game, I think you have all when they all met in the conference, from players, coaches, referees, medical, um, pundits, like every area of the game was represented. And from a match official's perspective, we said we can ref whatever you want us to referee, but stop making us make more decisions. If we put a chip in the ball to say the ball's gone forward, then we have more scrums, and then we have less ball in play time. Then we have less flow. So it's like, what game do we want to see from a spectacle perspective? And we're always striving for that. We'll be putting in, place the new global law trials and directives. And then when you look at Sanzar with the rugby championship, there's different trial in the 20-minute red card, for example, and different ways that we can try and improve the spectacle of the game. Um, and I think what's sometimes can be perceived as frustrating because you go to a different competition then and there's different law trials or different directives or guidelines. And I think that's something that may need to look at, but from a tournament perspective, obviously we're really trying to strive what's best for that game, for the game, for what spectacle we want to see. Um, and I think, yeah, if we just have that consistent across all tournaments, all game, then I think pe players, teams, everybody can adapt. Everybody knows what's happening then. But I think, yeah, going back to the point around what you made, Brian, around like what am I looking for? What are the key focus areas going into the game? Well, then that's aligned to obviously what the directives are for that tournament and World Rugby as well. So it's pretty aligned now across the board from URC, EPCR. It's all aligned to what World Rugby wants. As I said, the critical few and our focus areas want to be strong on safety. Yes, obviously there's a contest, but we want to ensure that there's continuity and flow in the game. So that will always be our balance. Trying to strike the right balance, I guess.
Yeah, and changing it up, what is something that like good captains or maybe like I don't know advice you would give to captains, or it's something I think that captains or players are often trying to work on and be better at, and say even now myself as a coach, like chatting or trying to help say a new captain. It's a big part of being a captain in rugby, and it's something that you don't really get help with a lot of the
Yeah,
time. You know, it's quite, and you see that as well actually at the top level. You know, you'll see someone, it's like, oh, he's just gotten the captaincy, and you can kind of see actually watching the TV that, you know, the commentators might say it, and you can see that he's not, you can kind of see that he's not dealing with the referee very well, and you kind of sometimes, you know, he's kind of going to him too much, and he's kind of, you know, just you can just see it, even as a spectator watching the TV. So, yeah, would you anything on that? Like, what kind of I don't know, you know, good experienced
yeah,
captains do, or what's that like?
yeah. I think like the biggest art for refereeing is communication. You know, obviously you want to be accurate decision making, but communication is the number one. You see the best referees in the world are able to communicate really well. You know, the likes of Nigel Owens and Jaco Piper, Wayne Barnes, to name a few, have recently retired. So I think like for me, like it was something I had to work on at the start, Brian, a lot. I wasn't. I remember people used to say, "Oh, you're not yourself on the field," and that really frustrated me. As it was coming across as quite forced to people who knew me best. I remember my dad, who was always the person I'd rely on from a communication piece. He was ex-teacher, um, general teaching council for Wales and chief executive there. So I was always lean on his kind of from a communication perspective. And I remember like a game that I did and it didn't go well. I remember there was a lot of kind of animosity in the game and there was losing control of the game and I started biting back to players and captains and that was probably resulted in people saying, "Oh, you're not yourself on the pitch," or you're not. You know, I was almost like teacher like. Whereas I think the best piece of advice I got was you got to listen to understand versus listen to reply. You know, we're very quick to replies, but you know, to get that respect, to gain respect, it has to go work both ways. So from a captain's perspective, a captain coming to you, you have to listen to their points because they might have a valid point. I remember best captains in the world, like Sam Warburton was unbelievable because he'd come to you, he'd ask a question, but he might only come to you once in the game. He's planted the seeds. He wasn't even expecting an answer. He'd walked away. And I thought it was just incredible because, you know, he wasn't trying to put the pressure on you, looking for an answer, look another question, next phase or next penalty, asking again. He just, the one time he'd come to you in the game. And that might be the difference between, you know, a 50-50 at the back of your mind subconsciously that, you know, yeah, he might have a point there, you know. And I thought that was really great. You know, the best captains like him and Rory Best, another one. And then you got other captains who are very, you know, confrontational, you know, as you mentioned, of emotional characters, of, you know, very, very competitive, play on the edge, will really try and push you at every opportunity they get. And there's just that's the game, isn't it? Every team has different characters, different personalities, different captains, and the art of refereeing is being able to build that relationship in the right way. I remember, as I said, that whole listen to understand versus listen to reply. Listen, you know, that's all a player wants to. I remember I always hated the referee who was straight back. I couldn't even speak to them. So that's what I'm trying to replicate now, you know, from my playing days is how would I want to be treated or spoken to if I was a player. So I try and replicate that from a refereeing perspective, and I'd like to think that that's helped with me and building rapport with teams and gaining respect. Because that's at the end of the day, that's what matters. You're not there to be liked as a referee, but you're there to be respected. We like to
Yeah,
be respected. Yeah.
yeah, brilliant. And interesting because that's one thing when you were reffing us in the AIL. Don't, you probably reffed me five, six times over a couple of years at back to what 2014, 15-ish. But
You're going to say all the bad things now.
no, no, no. It was one. No, it was one thing I genuinely remember. I and we used to love having you because you you would like I wasn't captain, but I was say calling the lineouts and pack yeah, calling the lineouts, pack leader, whatever there, and I would ask you things and talk to you, and you would just talk back. You know, like just we would have conversations. It's like, oh, it was like that, just little things, and it's like you could just have a dialogue, and like as a player, like that's just incredible because you have unfortunately, it was a case where 60, 70% of the refs, like you would ask one thing in the game and they would just snap at you and you're just like,
Yeah,
well, for fuck's sake, like
yeah,
fucking hell, like this fella, like it's just like it's just it's a real us and them. Like, the
yeah,
refs would nearly from minute one, they would create an us and them. And you're just like I'm not trying to give out to you. I'm not trying to have a go at you. Like I am literally, you know what I mean? It's like it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
it could be like I don't know, numbers that they might have seven and we five, and you might just say after like, oh ref, they had seven there or whatever, and it's like, oh, do you want to get penalized? It's like I'm
yeah.
no, I don't, So but
No, I
I
know.
I remember finding that, and yeah, you would just constantly talk to players throughout, and it wasn't just the captain. And yeah, maybe I think that could be from being a player yourself, but it's interesting then. Was it different then when you stepped up? Because what, yeah, as I said, at that level, 8, 9 years ago, it felt like that was what you were best at, as well as making calls. But yeah, that was
Yeah,
you.
no, and I think it's yeah, it's a good point, a good question, Brian. I think I think when you go up the levels then into the professional game, I think pressure does strange things to you, doesn't it? So like now that you're in the spotlight on TV, mic'd up, just different to All Ireland League, that now you sometimes come across as forced, but I shouldn't have changed anything different to what I was doing already. That's worked for me to get me to this stage that why change now? Just because you're in the professional game. I just think when you're in a professional game and there's we've all refereed games that haven't gone well for us because you have difficult characters you haven't gone on the right side of or got on the wrong side of. It's that they know how to push you, and that sometimes my downfall was that I bite back or be defensive. And that's the last thing you can be as a referee. You need to be ice cool under pressure to be able to diffuse a situation. So when a player sh screaming and shouting or frustrated, I'm now trying to understand, right, well, why is he frustrated? Is it something that I've got wrong? Is it something I've missed? Um, and does he have a point? Rather than biting straight back, don't speak to me like that, because he might have a point. So, and at times where I've got something wrong and then I've doubled down by moving on 10 meters, I've now fueled the fire because A, I've got it wrong. That's why he's frustrated. Now I've lost him more because I've moved on 10 meters. And I don't think that's a good part of game management then. Now there's always that going on 10 meters is it's a great tool to have in your box. We have to be strong on values as a game, but we don't want to overreact then either to situations. Is it something that you can work towards and you always have that as a last resort as opposed to going there straight away? Because that straight away from a refereeing perspective look on you in terms of, oh, have you moved on 10 meters? Well, why is that happened? And again, you bring the spotlight on you, but that might be for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. So it's just something that I've been more conscious of over the years. So
Yeah.
and you don't always get it right. You get games where you're like, should better situation or better decision there I could have given. Take the weekend just gone with Exeter to lose, and I marched on 10 meters twice. I think the first time was justified. The second time, then, is there a different decision I could have given? Both times I shouted, but did I overreact the second time? It was with the captain. I'm not saying just because it's the captain we have the special treatment, but did I have a better option there to go to? Could I said, Captain, I understand your frustration, but I think that's you've brought that you've kept that player on side as opposed to going on now he's doubly as frustrated. Um, so I always just try and kind of put myself now in the player's boots of right, well, why? Ask the question, why is that happened? Why has he reacted that way? Is it something that I've missed? Is it an error that I've made? You know, not to double down then, but at the same time though, Brian, we need to be strong on values as a game, as I alluded to.
Yeah, 100%. And it's class to see like just your perspective on, you've mentioned it 3 or 4 times, like experience and bad games you've had, and it's like it's the exact same as a player. Obviously, like we all have had those bad games as a player, and
Yeah.
you learn so much from them. And it's the same as a coach. Like we have all had those things where it's like, could I have done that differently? Like, oh, geez, did I set the team up as well as I could have, or did I deal with that player as well as I could have? And we're all, and you can see like the growth mindset that's coming across. Like we're all just learning. We're learning as we're going. Like we're all just learning all the time. And when you can understand that truly, first of all, yeah, see it and understand it as a player, as a coach, as a referee, that it's like we're always a work in progress. We're always just learning. I think one big thing is that it can really help you from beating yourself up a lot and from kind of getting, to getting into a spin or getting into a bad headspace where it's like you said last weekend, it's like same. Every player will look at the game last weekend and say that I could have done that better. Every coach will look at their last week and say, "Oh, I could have done that better." It's like there's no such thing as perfection, and you might do, 99 great things. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's and then just last one on that is I think that's very important is the support. Be it if you're a player, you need support from coaches or family, or if you're a coach, you need support as well. Or like I say, if you're a referee, you need support. You mentioned your dad and you have a coach, and so that like I think that support is huge for if you're performing at high levels because it's not easy to not get everything right and have to deal with it. And we're never going to get everything right. So it's really important having that support, eh?
Oh, no, very much so. And I think as you go through the years and you get tougher games and not everything goes the right way as you planned, that's where you definitely need to lean on those close around you and having that group of that small group of support that you can lean on, whether that's your family, as you said, Brian, or your coach, and people you trust. Because I found like that when you start listening to probably too many voices, then it muddies the
Mm,
waters. Then you start going, right, did I get that decision right? It's really a complex situation. Could have given yellow, could have given red, and now I start going around the houses to try and get a consensus vote of whether I got that decision right. And there's no such thing because I'm part of the head contact calibration group now, and we have the best ex-players and coaches and, as I said, judiciary medical in the room there, and we're never going to get full alignment even on clips. Very rare because you can find and sell a decision whatever way you want half the time. And that's what makes our game so unique, as I mentioned. Um, but no, I've certainly seen, particularly over the last 4 years, since COVID, since I've started getting a lot more kind of higher profile games of getting those opportunities in Six Nations and going to a Rugby World Cup. Um, there's just so many highs to lows that you really push yourself so hard to get the best games and put yourself in the best position to get big games. And if a game doesn't go well, how would you pick yourself back up to go again? And it can be a lonely world refereeing at times, and to not have that support mechanisms around you, then I think, yeah, it could be a long road. I can tell you. So yeah, that's the only thing that's probably got me through over the last few years. Losing my dad in COVID as well. After COVID, is like he was my best mate that I always leaned on in terms of from a support perspective. He got it, he loved rugby, understood it, and I trusted his opinion. I respected his opinions. To then no longer have that, then you're looking at, all right, who's your mentors, like, and that's why I think Johnny Lacey has been really great to me over the years, whether it's a friend, as from a coaching perspective, now gone into World Rugby. He'll always lean on that support from him and his respect his views from decisions and how you're going. But yeah, it's not an easy game, as I said, like because there's so many, yeah, probably got half a dozen of, or probably three or four internationals, I should say, in a year if you're lucky to be appointed to them, and you're almost like going into those games, high profile games. So you want to get every big moment right, but as soon as you start chasing decisions or chasing perfection, then that's when you become really inconsistent. And that's what I found over when games haven't gone well, and I've learned from the scars that I've got, or got the scars from matches that haven't gone well. That, as I mentioned earlier, the experience then to be in that moment again, could I have made better decisions? Would I be in a better place for it now if I'm in that moment again? So, um, and that's something that we're all really trying to stay consistent on to keep getting selected. But yeah, there'll always be things in every game. Yeah, and that's what's really nice about the review system now that we have, Brian. Like we have on a match analysis system online that I put up. So on the game of the weekend, now you'll have we've gone to a 3-2-1 system. There's three successes, two areas to think about, and one fix. So like I never want to kind of weaken my strengths to strengthen my weaknesses, because like what's worked well, what's going well for me in the game. That I don't want to change that then in the next game. But there's still areas that you will always improve on. Was that could I have given a different decision there, different outcome? Okay, there may be two areas to think about. Okay, what's my fixed piece then? Or what's the one thing that I want to change going into the next week? So still have your review process through the critical few, speed, safety space, line out more, scrum, game management, and then so still review my game there with my performance reviewer and coach. And then but the 3-2-1 is more of a kind of coaching tool to take forward into the next game.
Yeah. Sorry to hear about your dad. But yeah, the it's interesting, really interesting you say there about chasing decisions, and it's just really interesting in that it's getting into the flow state or performing at your best. Very once again, same for referees as players, in that for players that one of the most common things is chasing, making tackles, chasing, making line breaks, chasing, doing good things. And I think for a lot of players, I certainly did for many, many, many years, is you go into games chasing that, and it's like, let's you're thinking about in 5 minutes time, let's get a, like for you it might be like, let's not have only one penalty in the first 5 minutes, or let's get an offside penalty, or whatever it is. I don't know, whatever chasing decision means for whoever it is. But that what that does is it obviously takes you out of the moment, and it's like we have to, players, referees, whatever, whoever's performing, we have to have the confidence within ourselves to breathe and just be, and to just be in the moment, and
Yeah.
to just go for it, and to trust ourselves and back ourselves. I think that's the key to it, eh?
No, totally, mate. And that's why said earlier around the being in the moment, being in flow as much as you can. So I'm not thinking whether that decision was right or wrong, was the right or
Yeah.
wrong penalty, the right or wrong position. That needs to be instinctive. That needs to be right. Muscle memory takes over here. I've done it over and over again. It's business-like. And again, that goes back to a number of things, your experience, being in those bigger games more often. Yeah, just learning from the past, what's working, it's that repetitiveness of, being in those big games over and over and over again, same as a player, same as a team. So, um, yeah, and I think yeah. I remember listening to it was an interview Michael Atherton did on it was Ben Stokes around when he won England won the final there a few years back, and how Ben Stokes was able to turn it all around, and that was the one thing he said was he's able to just perform in the moment, not worry about whether okay he's the last wicket standing and they got 90 run chase to win the 2020 final. He was able to perform in that moment because he goes through high levels of training, be instinctive, not worry about whether it's the right shot, wrong shot, just doing what he's done over and over again for that to be instinctive, to make the best shot for that moment. And I thought that was really interesting because I've related that to refereeing that, that's the exact same for us. It's like I try and split the game up into four quarters. Again, whatever's happened in that first 20 going into the next 20, I can't change. So I want to talk about a big decision. I go right or wrong. All right, what's the trends? What's the areas we need to look at as a team? So we go into halftime. Okay, two boxes ticked, first quarter, second quarter. Get my TMO to come in and talk about a holistical view of how is it looking, bird's eye view, big picture stuff. Then ARs, what are we looking at? Offside lines, are we missing? offsides? Are they tight on the offside lines? Scrums, am I on the right side of the scrum? Do I need to get on the other side? Am I getting accurate pictures there? So they're the areas that I want us to look at. What are the trends? What is the theme of the game, the story of the game going into the second half? Not looking at whether the decision was right or wrong that I can't change. So was that the right red card? Was that the right try we gave there? That's all after the game. We can review that after the game. So it's like, what's the fixed piece? What's the areas we're doing well? What's the areas we need to look at going into the second half? And that's how I try and kind of split up the game, 4 quarters. Yeah, move on to the next job.
Yeah, good way to look at it. And so halftime, how's that for you?
Yeah, so I used to have a conversation with Johnny Lacey a lot at halftime, from a coaching perspective, because it was something that we drove a lot, a couple of years ago, because I like, well, as a player would speak to their coach. So I don't see why it's any different for us. So if he's watching at home, he just give me the big picture stuff. Initially it was like a message, but then we talk over the phone, and then yeah, that was difficult from a logistical point of view. Then, speaking to somebody at halftime, it's an outside influence that can, people can that could just draw attention, unnecessary attention to. So, yeah, it's not something that I do anymore, but I still want to get my TMO's view from he's looking at it from a TV perspective. I think it's really important. You can see stuff so differently on field to off field. Um, and yeah, so I get his view at halftime, and then the assistant refs and 4 and 5. What are you seeing on sidelines? Like just getting everybody's view from the team. And as I mentioned, what are the areas we need to look at going into the second half? Yeah, not talking about big moments, right or wrong. We look at that after the game, but I think that having somebody from a coaching perspective at halftime, I think is something that we need to look at as a group and to continue on there, because I don't see any difference from a team. We need to evolve like the teams and the players. So for players speaking to their coaches at halftime, then I see why shouldn't it be any different to us as a refereeing team, you know?
Yeah, it's a great point that I never thought of, and it makes perfect sense. And it's yeah, it makes perfect sense, and yeah, very would be very helpful. Um, yeah, if you had a coach
It's
there with you.
it's better if you obviously there in person, but that's obviously not possible from a logistical point of view. If Frank's looking at my game now on the weekend, he's also got to he's watching Chris's game, Cross's game, Peter's game. He might be looking at somebody else as well, performance reviewing over the weekend. So you're looking at 4 or 5 games over a weekend. So yeah, it's busy for them as well, and they need to be in front of the TV to be taking live notes. And then after a game, then I'll get those notes sent on, or I'll have that review call then on. I can watch the game back on a flight home, and then I'll have that review call then. So I got back yesterday. I did a review call with Frank this morning, and we'll just go through what are the key points, what are the key areas coming out of the game, what worked, what didn't. So yeah, all aligned to what I said around the review process. Then I put that up on my match analysis system, and then the performance reviewer will come back. I'll have a call with the performance reviewer. We'll talk through the playlist, which they have. It would be about probably 10 clips, 10 to 15 things, situations in the game, good, bad, non-decisions, high impact decisions. And then we'll talk about that. And that'll be the crux of the review then. And then I'll do up my boxes review, and then they'll do their half of the review, and then straight into try and close the game out by Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you're into the next week. So you're preparing for the following weekends, because yeah, it's a lot of individual responsibility, see, Brian, around your own individual prep from a refereeing perspective. Yeah, we have our analysis there in RFU, like John Buckley. Anything that I need from a team perspective, you'll send on like team DNAs, around penalties for, against, or trends that can help me in my preparation. And the same, then we have Matty Johnson there in World Rugby who do the same for us, leading into teams. So just being the best prepared, no stones left unturned almost. But then you just got to take that data and stats. within context because you have to do your own prep, and having that as a support is great. But it's all got to be taken in context because I remember we had a talk from Steve Hansen in Dubai, and he talked about there's a big difference between preconceived ideas and trends. Trends are factual. So I'm going in with a preconceived idea of a prop penalising last week, but it might be a wrong penalty. So I need to do my own prep on that. Okay, was that prop penalised 3 or 4 times over the course of 3, 4 games? Well, then that might be a trend now, so versus one-off decisions. And that's all part of your kind of preparation as a referee team going in, and where you're going to be challenged, what you're going to be presented with. Um, what are the potential problematic areas? Where do we need to be focused on in what areas of the pitch? And that's where I think is the game's evolved from a refereeing perspective, is not just preparing your team, but also how you're going to be challenged in that particular game itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers for your time. Just one or two last questions. But what
Yeah.
advice would you give to younger younger referees?
I always say get as many games under your belt as possible, Brian. Like that's how I learned, get mud on the boots, whether that's a schools game on a Wednesday, a game on a Saturday, club game. I try and take those games early on, like in terms of my development pathway is been huge because what's the things I can take from that Wednesday schools game to put into the Saturday game and then vice versa into the Wednesday game. And the more games you can get under the belt early on, the faster you're going to grow and develop, I think. Yeah, is there always going to be plain sailing? Of course not. Will there be games where you question yourself? Of course. I've gone into the car driving from the north down, or even when I refereed your game back in the day, Brian, you're back in the car by yourself. You have nobody to talk to, and you're driving back to Limerick. So I'm like, you start then questioning, oh, did I have a good game? Did I not? Whereas if you're coming off the pitch, you have your mates there, your team. You can chat together as a team. And that was the hardest challenge when I started refereeing because you just don't know whether you had a good game or not. You're always going to get shouted at the sidelines from both teams. One team's going to be unhappy. So, um, yeah, for me, it's just about trying to take those learnings on board really early, try and put them into the next game, try and rectify that, try not to make the same mistakes or the same areas, trends in the next week and the next game, and try and learn quick as best as you can.
Yeah, brilliant.
Enjoy it.
And
That's the most
yeah,
important thing because you never know when the journey could be over.
yeah, 100%. On that, how long would you like to or think about going for?
It's $1 million question, mate. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I've been going 10 years now, 2 World Cups. Obviously my goal is to do a World Cup final. That is my goal. My goal, long-term goal when I start 10 years out with the RFU is to get to 2023. And I achieved that last year, which was great. My next goal is to do a Rugby World Cup final one day, but if it doesn't happen, well, I've enjoyed the journey, and I'm going to try and put myself in the best possible position to be as successful as I can be. And if those opportunities come up, then great, but it's out of your control. You can't control appointments, and yeah, I'm loving the game at the moment, and yeah, if that's another year or two to get to the next World Cup, great. If it's another 2 World Cups, great. Um, I could be sick of it in the next World Cup cycle. You just never know what could happen. You don't know with injury, don't know with performance. Yeah, just could take each game as it comes, as the old cliche says.
Yeah, no, you seem to be from the outside looking at a young fella just getting started. So
Yeah.
plenty of years
Cheers, mate. I don't
left.
know about that.
Yeah.
My hairline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and then yeah, very last one, last
Yeah.
question, but just to preface it, you mentioned a lot of the TMO throughout the chat, and I think that's something that's interesting. Like I've heard, I can't remember a couple of top coaches saying it's like they feel for the ref and the TMO, and it's like I think we all 10 years ago was like, oh, there's this, cricketer doing this or rugby league are doing this or whatever, and TMO came in and it was like we did have those high profile games that were decided because there was no TMO and it was a forward pass that the ref couldn't see, and it's like, oh, we don't want that. Like we want the try given the right way, but it's I think over the last few years, everyone has realized it's like the TMO has been a bit of a headache at times as well. It's like, are we using it too much? Which I think everyone
Yeah.
understood and it was brought back. And um, I think it's still just always, it's always a work, a continuous thing, like everything, reviewing laws,
100%.
reviewing how TMOs are used. But yeah, I think and everyone feels for the refs in those situations sometimes where it's like because some people are saying, oh, every call has to be right. But sorry, to get to the end of my point is that I think it could have been Eddie Jones, but some top ref was like, hey, we used just the ref the game, and it's like the ref the game. We players played the game, and the game is just the game. And it's like you mentioned, it's like the game is not. It's not black and white, and it's like we just want to just let someone referee the game. So it's challenging anyway. I can imagine
Yeah, no,
with the TMO, yeah.
no, you're right, and I think that's a big part for us all that we're all striving to make strong on-field decisions.
Mm,
That's what the game needs. That's what we don't want to be reviewing something that doesn't make sense or stopping the game for every moment, for every technical infringement. So I think that's the first thing. I think I talked about earlier on getting what matters, getting the big moments right. But a big part of World Rugby is like pushing us to always to own decisions on field, be strong as that as a team of three on field to almost eliminate the TMO from coming in because we've done our job on field. Um, I think like a cliche, but work rate is massive, Brian. You know, getting itself in the best position to make the best decisions. I find when we're not doing that, or our work rate's off, or we don't work hard enough to get into in goal, or we're lazy to get into in goal, then that's when we start referring things for reassurance. Then, so I think I always my mantra with my team is work rate, energy, effort. But I bring that. They're our non-negotiables, our trademark behaviors um, that to put ourselves in those best positions. So, you shouldn't have to have the TMO coming in because you've done your job on field. So, assistant refs working back to the offside line, working back with the pass to make sure it's not forward. Referee the same. Um, so, and then the role clarity piece is important then on field because everybody knowing their own roles and staying in their own lane. It's when we don't do that, then we become inconsistent, or team or the other somebody else or some member of the team is trying to do the other person's job, and then we have TMOs inputting for things that we don't need. Um, and I think it is always going to be the challenge. I think it's something we're reviewing now is do we bring it back of, just making sure the referee and the assistants get it on field, and then the TMO corrects the on field team if they're clearly wrong, not trying to prove the referee wrong. I think there's a clear difference because
mm,
then you're chasing that perfection piece as opposed to getting what matters. So, if you're clearly forward, okay, so I'm coming in as a TMO to say, Brian, I want to show you a clear forward pass, not I want to check that pass, because then, I'm saying, right, I'm going to show you a clear forward pass because it's clearly forward on field and the whole world can see it. And they're like, what are you looking at? Versus just want to check the last pass. So I think
yeah.
the misperception at the moment is, I get a lot of captains, teams, or players, you checking that? Are you checking that? Well, we're always checking in the background. You can still do that informally. It's just whether we're formally reviewing it and putting it on the screen. There's a difference. So a lot of our work will be done informally. So like if Ollie's working with me on the weekend, it's like, Andy, that's a high tackle, penalty advantage, and we keep playing. So I don't have to stop the game. I don't need to put it on the screen to review. Just keep going with the game. So the flow in the game is not stopped, versus check, check. Okay, Ollie, coming to you. Now that's formally reviewed because we think it's more than a penalty and it needs to be reviewed for possible card or level of sanction. So, um, yeah, I think I kind of summarize that is just, yeah, we want to get the big moments right. and that whether that's tries, cards, that's all that matters at the end of the day. If you don't get those big moments right, well then the whole performance then is critiqued. So it's like, well, you didn't get that try right, you gave the wrong card that wasn't necessary, and then the scrums weren't great as well. So and the breakdown, and then all the other technicalities are reviewed, the minor infringements on top of the big decisions as well. Versus if you get the big decisions right, I'm not saying if you ref the scrum poorly, it doesn't matter. Of course it matters, but in the grand scheme of things, that can be an area to look at and fix for the next day. What are my work-ons? But at the end of the day, the right team won. Nobody's talking about me. Yeah, and that's what we're striving for all the time. But it's a work in progress, as you said. Whether the bunker's going to be centralized or, there's, talks about that at the international level is whether you have a central bunker like the NRL, that could be a possibility. Because at the end of the day, it's all cost as well, Brian, and the game is something the game is, we're always striving for more, or, that's the biggest challenge from a financial perspective. Yeah, but then at the same time, got to be careful what we wish for. Do we want more technology? And then we have a more start-stop game as a result. So I think, yeah, that's the $1 million question. We got to get the happy medium. Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant, unreal. Well, thanks a mil, Andy, for your time and chatting. It's been
yeah,
class, and yeah, it's been class to see you going from reffing us and to watching you on the TV in the biggest game. So yeah, congrats with that, and best luck continued going
no,
forward.
thanks, mate. No, I appreciate it.
Cheers.